Brave spaces are environments rooted in open, honest, candid, and safe communication. Spaces that reward challenge, support calculated risks, and invite constructive discomfort. As AI disrupts every aspect of human work, brave spaces are essential to help teams navigate the uncertainty, confusion, and anxiety that brings all of that disruption along with it. We've talked about psychological safety before, how essential it is for transparency, trust, and innovation. And it still is. Yet, psychological safety isn't the destination, it's a heading, a means to an end. That end is the cultural capacity to stretch, question, and evolve together. And that's what brave spaces make possible. Today, we'll explore how brave spaces build upon psychological safety, while they matter now more than ever, and how to create them in ways that elevate, not destabilize your team culture. First, let's take a look at psychological safety and compare it to brave spaces and see how the two fit together. Remember that psychological safety is having the freedom from interpersonal fear. It creates a trust based openness where we can have good, effective communications with others. Amy Edmondson's definition gives us a strong foundation. A psychologically safe environment is one where people feel they can speak up with their ideas, their questions, their concerns, or mistakes without fear of humiliation or punishment. That's critical. And as AI continues to reshape the workplace, bringing massive change, ethical uncertainty, and role ambiguity, that foundation alone is no longer enough. So let's look at brave spaces, what we can create once we've established psychological safety. Brave spaces are cultures where courage is modeled and speaking up is expected. Now, that word expected is really important, and it's one that always intrigues me. And also, I meant as a coach, I'm really very curious every time that something happens and the reaction from leadership was, well, did anybody know anything about it? Did anybody speak up? And they're shocked, they're surprised, and I almost feel indignant when people say, "Well, yeah, I knew." Well, why didn't you say anything? The expectation is really strong. And I understand that from a business perspective, of course, it makes sense. If we have people, capable people, intelligent people who know something, well, we expect for them to contribute what they know. However, the question that I always ask leadership: did you make it safe for people to speak up? Did you make the investment to create a safe space so that people could speak up? When leadership fails to create that psychological safety, the priority for people is to survive. It's not to speak up. Why do we expect people to speak up when we're putting them in a potentially vulnerable position where they don't know if speaking up is, they might not make it through the meeting? This is an unrealistic expectation. We first have to establish a psychological safety so that people know that speaking up is not going to get them fired right away or fired at all. We need to create that psychological safety as the beginning. This is the base in order to have that expectation. We can't have the expectation if we haven't created the psychological safety. And there's a trajectory that we're talking about today where we evolve from establishing the safety to getting to the point of courage, where people are courageous to speak up every time that it's needed, when it's necessary, when they know something. This is how agile culture has always aimed. It has always aimed beyond comfort. And this is a huge misconception and one driven by a lot of good intentions. The reality of it is that in Agile, there's a lot of people pleasers. And as a recovering people pleaser myself, believe me, I understand. I've seen it. There's nothing but good intentions, a lot of really good hearted people. However, there's been a lot of misinterpretation on what these things mean. And when we talk about psychological safety, many people have left it at just making it comfortable, making a happy place to work in. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And that alone brings about a lot of benefits. And it's a worthwhile pursuit. So I'm not discouraging anybody to create comfortable places. Of course, we want to have comfortable workplaces. And we need to look at it from a business perspective. What is the value? What is the business value of creating the comfortable workplace? There are plenty of benefits, and we need to understand what they are, and we need to deliver on those benefits. Brave spaces is one of the things that psychological safety delivers. So we need to understand the difference between the two of them, because what happens is people stop at the psychological safety. And yes, it's all happy, happy, joy, joy. However, the company starts having problems. We'll talk about those. Instead, we need to go beyond psychological safety and get to the brave workplaces. So there are key differences. Psychological safety reduces fear for a purpose. Once we've reduced that fear, we want to engage in that purpose. And that's what brave places do. They embrace healthy discomfort. That's the key. That embrace healthy discomfort, we use it for a purpose, to speak up. So psychological safety supports, it creates the environment that supports learning and gives people a voice to speak up when they have something that they've learned, something they want to share, a problem that's happened that they need to share with everybody. That's what psychological safety does. Brave spaces enable challenge, change, and innovation. And that challenge one is a really important one, because without that bravery, um, we may stop, even if we feel somewhat psychologically safe, we may stop because any number of mental stories. You can't challenge the boss, you can't challenge the CEO. That's not possible. But if that's the root of the problem, if that's where the issue is, why can't we challenge the CEO? We should have the conversation about how the actions and decisions of the CEO are directly related to the issue at hand. If we haven't created psychological safety, that conversation is never going to happen. Once we've established psychological safety, then we need to work to create the brave space in order for that conversation to happen. And of course, that's a difficult conversation to have. And when it's a necessary one, it's one that we must have in order to help the company. The challenge can also come from it's a different group. Okay, well, it's not part of my group, so I can't say anything. It needs to go through proper channels in order to have a conversation. That is cooperation, throwing things over the wall. That's not business agility. That's not going to help resolve the issues quickly and effectively, efficiently. That's going to introduce a lot of delay if the issue gets addressed at all. Oh, this is a senior person in the company. They've been here forever. They know a lot more than I do. Or maybe we know that we know more, but we don't want to be perceived as if we're challenging the expert. Why not? We have a perspective. We have something valuable to add. Let's add it to the value of the expert that is already there. That can only happen in brave spaces. It doesn't happen otherwise. So we need this bravery, especially when we're engaging in transformations, whether it's AI, agile, or otherwise. Any type of transformation where we are fundamentally changing things, the way that things have been done for a purpose, not just because, we need to be brave. We need to be able to challenge things. When we just stop at the psychological safety, a funny thing happens. It stalls progress. That's the problem that I alluded to before. Safe silence can lead to groupthink or missed warnings. Why? Because when we make safety, psychological safety, the priority, that's the end game. When people are focused on making sure that nothing is said and nothing happens, that potentially disrupts that happy, joy, joy kind of feeling. Well, some tough conversations are absolutely going to disrupt that. They're absolutely going to ruffle feathers. They're absolutely going to create a discomfort and upset. If we're not willing to have those conversations, then we fall to groupthink. When we go into meetings and we hear everybody and everybody's happy with the solution, and we're thinking, no, I think that's going to fail spectacularly. But we keep quiet because the priority is to have that psychological safety and everybody be happy, happy. And when it fails, we'll go, yeah, I didn't think it was going to work. Well, why didn't you say anything? Because we were stuck in psychological safety. We didn't create the brave space for that person to say, well, I'm glad that everybody's happy with it. And my perspective is that that's going to fail spectacularly for this reason. So this is really valuable to have that. We want to have the calculated risk versus avoidance, and people being willing to make those calculated risks, take those calculated risks, as opposed to just hiding behind the safety and avoiding them. Safety encourages reporting, yes. It creates the environment where we can speak up. Bravery takes it a step further and it supports questioning the assumptions. And that's what leads us to root causes, root cause analysis, root cause inspection to resolve the issues that we need to be dealing with, as opposed to the ones that are comfortable to deal with. Now, AI transformation augments the need for this tremendously because there's so much uncertainty and speed. If we're going to wait for things to be comfortable and nice and then have the conversation, forget it. AI is already come and gone. Is we need to be able to do it on the fly as quickly as possible. If we don't, then, for example, the ethical weight of the things that we need to deal with, those require boldness and immediacy. If we're not, it's operating in a brave space, we're not going to have those conversations. And then unethical and dangerous implementations will see the light of day. They will leave our companies and potentially harm others, society. So this has had really huge implications. There are many missed opportunities when we stop at the psychological safety and we don't go beyond. Teams avoid pushback due to fear of conflict. They don't want to get into the icky, unpleasant stuff. It feels unsafe. I get it. But we've established psychological safety. We should be able to go beyond. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't establish psychological safety and immediately have bravery. We need to take steps. We'll talk about those. And we need to recognize that just stopping at the psychological safety is not going to deliver the true business agility that we need. When we don't take those extra steps and go into the brave spaces, ethical risks get buried under politeness, and we're being nice. There's an innovation paradox here, and we really need to take to heart, and it's that the safest workplaces feel nice, and they stagnate, and the brave spaces feel uncomfortable, yet they adapt and grow beautifully. That's what we want. That's true business agility. So I mentioned earlier, now with true good intentions, a lot of people have misinterpreted in the agile space psychological safety and just stopped at the comfort and have hurt companies. Companies have not evolved. They've stagnated. They've stayed in. All of these blocks get created because it's not nice to go there. It's icky to go there. That's because we're stuck in psychological safety. We need to go beyond that. Psychological safety is not just this touchy-feely thing. We need to use the comfort for a purpose. That's what we're talking about today. So to create a psychological safe, to create psychological safe environments, I've talked about that in other videos, to create the brave spaces, to put them in practice, of course we need leadership. We need leadership modeling this. So they're the first ones that by admitting mistakes, it communicates to everybody in the organization that, hey, we're human, we all make mistakes. Let's talk about it so that we can get past the mistake. In my leadership, in any position that I've held, I've always made it a priority to focus not on perfection of execution, but on recovery from failure during execution. The teams that impress me the most are the ones that are able to recover the fastest and with the least effort or conflict. Those are fantastic teams, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for perfect teams. There's nobody perfect. I make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. The question is, how quickly do we recover from those mistakes? If we have the brave spaces, that speeds that up. So there's huge value to that. And as leaders, we encourage that to happen when we're the first ones that we make a mistake and we talk about it openly. I know it's uncomfortable. We're not accustomed to that. Waterfall conditions to say that leaders are perfect and never, ever, ever make any mistakes. Well, that's not real. So let's get to reality and let's make it so that we do get the expected people talking by modeling that it's okay to talk. By taking interpersonal risks first as leaders, we're modeling that it's okay to do that. By asking uncomfortable questions, we're communicating that it's okay to have those icky conversations. We're going to be smart about how we may have those conversations, of course. I'm not going to have other problems. And we need to communicate that it's okay to have that. It doesn't all have to be pretty and nice all the time. In order to help us do this, in addition to leadership support, there are also structural enablers that make it easier for this to happen. Feedback loops is right up there on the top of the list. I mentioned in other videos about feedback loops and how important they are in agile culture. And feedback loops are not about specific times or remembering that, gee, I wonder how things are going. I should go ask. Mm, yes, we want to be able to do that. And we want for information to be flowing constantly, for there to be abundance of information, feedback, so that at any moment we can turn around, we can get a good picture of what's going on and use that information. When feedback loops are properly established, it's just natural for there to be flow of information, including uncomfortable, difficult information. We also want to have cross-functional dialogue. Having this separation of by departments with which Waterfall established, it creates barriers. And many times the issue that needs to be dealt with is not unique and maybe experienced and seen in one group. However, its source and the reason why we got there, all of the steps that got there, involved a lot of people. So we want to have conversations with everybody that's involved and touched by the situation. The broader, the better. And once we do that, we will get a good perspective of what's going on and get to a better outcome, a better resolution of whatever it is that we need to do. When we do that, now we can truly be in a space of shared decision making. And that's so important because that eliminates a lot of finger pointing and a lot of defensive behaviors. If we're all in it together, when things go wrong, well, we're all cleaning it up together, and that's okay. That's life. And how good that we can all work together to resolve it. We have support. It's not just us trying to navigate through it. Very important in establishing these brave spaces also is normalizing discomfort. That's really important. And again, we do so much, and we've done so much. There's been so much emphasis on the psychological safety. And again, I'm not talking against psychological safety. I'm saying that's the beginning. It's not the end. And because we have just talked about psychological safety, we've failed to normalize discomfort. It's not okay to feel uncomfortable. No, we want to be able to go into that discomfort space so that we can have the good, the valuable conversations. So whenever we engage in retrospectives, all these really nice retrospectives, no, retrospectives are a great place to embrace conflict, not conflict of going to war and fights with each other, but conflict on really bringing up the issues that need to be talked about. Establish candor as as a cultural norm. And a really valuable practice that you could consider doing is rotate a devil's advocate role. Now, it sounds a little crazy, but consider that you want for everybody in the team to feel comfortable engaging in that discomfort and those icky conversations. And if we leave it up to the situation requiring people to do that, they don't have the practice, they don't have the habit, they don't have the experience of going through it. And that's going to be an impediment for them to even try it. If we establish in your retrospectives, for example, the role, you're devil's advocate today. Now that's your role. It's to stir up the pot, to bring a different perspective, to play the other side of whatever it is. Don't do it for every sentence, that gets boring, but really engage in useful counter points in the discussion around them. That's going to help people feel comfortable with this. And that's going to enable you for the moment that you really need it, for people, anybody to do it. Because we want anybody in the organization to be able to do it at all times, whenever it's necessary. Now, it's really important to balance support and managing the challenges around establishing brave workspaces. And respect has to be the container. We need to maintain that respectful relationship and interactions with others. So psychological safety is the floor. That's the base. Okay, that's not the ceiling. We want to build on top of that, and we want to define norms that allow us to operate in that space of respect while still having those difficult, conflictive, challenging, dangerous conversations. One thing to keep in mind is how neurodivergence factors into this. We need to be compassionate, and we need to be understanding, and we need to be educated about how to properly set things up so that we can incorporate neurodivergent communications into this process. And we need to recognize that either because we don't have the experience, we don't have the skill, or because there's an neurodivergence factor to consider, we will have really icky conversations and meetings. Meetings can absolutely go very wrong in this space. We need to be prepared for that. We need to understand that whether it's because we've never done it before, people are not uncomfortable, they don't have the skill, they don't have the communication skills, the finesse, the ability to nuance communication, expressing the concerns, the point that needs to be talked about, but doing it in a way that's digestible for everybody. When, for whatever the reasons, whether it's experience, neurodivergence, or anything else, that's going to happen, okay? And we need, just like any other experimentation, this is established in psychological safety, we need to make it safe for everybody to make those mistakes. They will happen, okay? So be prepared for that. I think that's true inclusivity. It's being prepared for that and not overreacting when it happens. It's going to happen. It's just a fact of life. Learn how to work through that. And that will teach you, if that's part of your culture, if that's part of your group, if that's part of your team, then you will start learning ways to manage that. So for example, one of the things that you could do is introduce asynchronous written input before the meetings. That might give people who don't have the experience or the skill or the ability to have those difficult conversations, they'll give them the opportunity to contribute in a way that is easier for them to be able to work through and more effective for them to be able to work through. So this could be chat threads, collaborative documents, or any other format that works for individuals. Wherever possible, you do want to get to a point where everybody can do this, but that may take time. And for some people, it just may not be possible. So be prepared to manage that. There's an element where this is where I would say that leadership and management can be really helpful to be truly supportive in making sure that we establish this in a safe way for everybody. Now, once we've established this, once we're on a road to creating those brave spaces, we need a way to measure how we're doing, how we're evolving. So there's signs that we're growing in a good direction, we're growing braver. And that's, for example, increased constructive dissent. You're seeing from iteration to iteration that there is more dissent that is leading to better outcomes. That's really good. Or we surface blockers earlier so that they don't become blockers. People are truly engaging, having the conversations about impediments. A blocker is an impediment that was allowed to go too long. So people are talking about the impediments early on. We're not getting into the blockers. That's fantastic. That means that there is not just psychological safety, but there's the bravery of talking about things, asserting ourselves. If a team member raises a concern of an impediment and no action has been taken, and they follow up and they assert themselves that, hey, it's like, we better pay attention to this. As I mentioned, this is going to block us. That's fantastic. We want to see things like that. And another thing that we want to see is better risk identification. When we haven't established a brave workplace, and beyond, we haven't established psychological safety, there is no opportunity to have the conversations about risky things. Why? Because I don't want to stick my neck out. I don't want to put myself in a vulnerable position. So people stop looking for the risks. Why bother if we're not going to talk about them? If subconsciously or maybe consciously they know that they're not going to have a conversation about it, why spend the energy? People have enough things to do. When we have established that brave workplace and we start seeing that the risks are being identified earlier on, we're having more conversations, that's a really good sign. And there we're reaping the benefits of establishing this successfully. Signs that we're not establishing this successfully is disrespect disguised as candor. People get really nasty. And, oh, I'm just doing it because I'm being candid. No, you're being a jerk. Thank you very much. That's horrible. You're being a bully. We need to tell the difference between the two. And it's subtle. And now we're playing into interpreting people's motivations. And that's really hard to do. But to the extent that we can, understand the difference between somebody genuinely acting from a space of bravery and as opposed to just being rude and being nasty. There's a difference between the two of them. So watch out for that. As leaders, it's really important. Leaders and managers, are really important to pay attention to that, be able to tell the difference between the two of them and address what we don't want to see, which is that bullying behavior and that toxic behavior, and support, as uncomfortable as it may be, the candor that's leading to good outcomes. Another thing that we don't want to see is this burnout, masked as courage. And the way that you recognize it is that from iteration to iteration, there's always the brave one who's willing to talk about things, or a couple of people. As I mentioned earlier, we really want to see a rotation. We want to see everybody in the team doing that. Because if it's just always one person that's carrying the banner of I'm the ones who's willing to bring up a conflict, that hasn't really reached a healthy level. And those individuals, as much as many times they really are taking the role seriously and they really want to contribute in that way, end up looking very badly with the team, and the team tends to see them as a problem. They're always the one that brings up the problem, the problem, the problem. That's falling on them. They're the only ones doing it. You want it to be balanced. You want it to be everybody participating, because everybody can see things and everybody should. So that's why that rotation of the devil's advocate can be really good, because people may not be doing it just because they're not comfortable or they're afraid to do it. Another thing that you want to leverage is feedback mechanisms. And here I want to have talk about anonymous feedback. When I started on this Agile journey, there was a lot of talk about how bad anonymous feedback was, and we wanted to avoid it at all costs. And I agree with that. I agree that it is not desirable. We want to, it flies in the face of transparency, and transparency is key in Agile. So you want to have those open conversations about anything. And experience has taught me that this is a journey. This isn't something that you can just flip the switch and overnight avoid the anonymous feedback. And in fact, what happens is there's the gap period between not having established psychological safety and establishing it, during which many things are happening. And if we don't have a way for people to express what's going on, we're going to miss that valuable feedback during that period. So anonymous feedback used selectively with clear intent at the appropriate time can be really, really, really valuable. So don't dismiss it. It's an end goal to not depend on it. Don't use it as a default, but as a transitional support tool to get you through whatever you need to get through to get to that psychological safety when you're still developing psychological safety. That can be really helpful. And it makes sure that you're not missing out on the valuable feedback that we really haven't created the space to surface yet. Don't overuse it, and don't. You want to avoid creating the suggestion bus culture. That's not going to help you. And think of it as learning how to ride a bicycle. There's the third wheel. Okay, so the goal is to create an environment where you don't need the third wheel, and recognize that there's a period where you do need the third wheel. So leverage it during that time, and then evolve beyond that. You want to get to the create an environment where anonymity isn't necessary because people feel safe to speak openly. You want to stop that third wheel bicycling as soon as possible, and do it at the right moment. So if you are going to use anonymous input, then what you want to do is come up with a way to publish a public synthesis of the surfaced themes without exposing individuals. This is really critical. In my experience, my life experience has taught me there's two things. We need to manage them very carefully. There's the issue, the data, the information that we need to deal with, and then there's the individual or individuals associated with it. Wherever possible, make a distinction in the choice of which one you need to talk about. Do you need to talk about the issues and the matters and the data, or do you need to talk about the individual or individuals? If you need to talk about the individuals, talk to the individual or individuals. Don't talk about the individuals in public meetings. Okay, so that's to make sure that we have a successful conversation. Otherwise, obviously, there's going to be a lot of defensiveness, a lot of deflection, and a lot of protection. And the bulk of the conversations we want to have around the issues, the information. So if you're going to use anonymous feedback, distill the information in a way that doesn't disclose the individual, and you can, as a group, talk about the issues. So don't just take cut and paste. Somebody gives an anonymous suggestion and cut and paste whatever they wrote and put it out in the public. People are going to figure out who wrote it by the writing style. Instead, this is where leadership and management are really important. Use your communication skills to nuance the communication so that you are communicating the information, so that the team can talk about the information without talking about the individuals. And if you have to talk about the individual, talk to the individuals, not about the individuals. Okay. Another thing is, independent whether it's anonymous or not, it's really important to ensure visible follow through on the tough feedback to build trust and demonstrate that brave input leads to meaningful action. There needs to be some outcome from speaking up. I've talked about this in the context of retrospectives. The most useless retrospectives, and the thing that's going to guarantee that your retrospectives are just going to fail as a practice, is you collect all the information. People were brave enough to talk about it, spend the time, the investment to talk about something, and then nothing happens. That's just going to kill it, okay? And it doesn't make any sense. Why have a chat and then take no action? You want to make it very visible and very clear that engaging in bravery and talking about the difficult topics leads to a result, and that result is positive. That result is, it moves the needle in a positive direction for the team and individuals involved. And lastly, you want to establish metrics that objectively measure your progress along this journey to establish brave spaces. And a simple one is create a ratio of dissenting comments per iteration. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's having those dissenting comments per iteration, paying attention that you're seeing an increase and that they're leading to positive results. That's a fantastic metric that you can use to confirm progress and benefit of engaging in this practice. So the progression that you want to see is you want to establish the floor, the beginning is psychological safety. So you have that psychological safety. That creates the trust to speak up, to have the conversations. And those conversations include challenges, the things that are going to help you grow. So you go from safety to trust to challenge and growth. This is the business agility goal and the benefit that you get from establishing psychological safety. Psychological safety is not the end. It's the beginning of establishing that, the business agility. So we want to think about how this Brave workspace can benefit our workplaces, how we can reap the benefits, how we can improve our operations, our implementations, our development. So let's put it into practice. Let's think about what is one concrete step moving forward that you can take either to establish psychological safety if you haven't established it yet, or to go beyond and establish the brave workplace. Let us know in the comments. And crucial conversations, which is related to all of this, it teaches us the dialogue skills that brave spaces rely on. So if you'd like to learn more about crucial conversations, click one of these. I'll be happy to tell you all about it.